It's September the 1st, 2024. I haven't done a tour for quite a while, so welcome to the channel and let's have a look around my tropical style garden here in the UK. Okay, so if you're new to my channel, my garden is in Peterborough in the UK, which is pretty much the top end of East Anglia in Cambridgeshire, but right on the Cambridgeshire, South Lincolnshire sort of border. My garden is about 12 meters wide by about 24 meters long, roughly. I've been doing it about 13 years now in this location, and my style of doing this is to try and find lots of hardy, evergreen, unusual plants that can stay out most of the year and then add the tenders to it. So I want a garden that's going to look pretty good most of the year and then try and take it to the next level in summer. So let's have a look round, see what I'm growing, and any thoughts, please leave it in the comments. Right, so I'm going to start with the border nearest to my house, which is pretty much where I always start. This on the left side of my garden is the sunnier side of my garden, and this border here pretty much in the peak of summer will get sunlight up until about maybe 1-2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then it's shaded out. So it does get quite a lot of sunlight, and is slightly raised, so is a good free draining soil. I am on clay, but it's about 1 meter down, so my soil is really free draining and allows me to grow quite a good sort of wide variety of plants. So let's get started. In here we have the Musa Bijou at the back, which I pretty much leave out unprotected all year. If it gets killed back, I'd be gutted, but it will soon grow back again if it goes back to the ground. So in here, this bit I've changed around a little bit because I didn't really like it, and I still don't think I really like it, to be honest. But I've put behind this Persicaria, we've got a Pittosporum tabera there, which is going to fill that gap, and it will sort of pretty much look evergreen all year round. It's got some overhead protection by the Trachycarpus, so hopefully, unless we have real severe winters, it should stay looking evergreen and good all year round. Then we've just gone for some black grasses at the bottom and this ground covering Persicaria. Then we have got the what most people would know as Aloe striatula, but is now Aleamplus striatula. So basically don't do anything with that. In a real harsh winter, that can get cut back to the ground, can get blackened. Most winters it'll be fine, but it should regrow. As long as you've got free draining soil, it should regrow from the base, unless you have probably real exceptional cold. Here we have my Camerops cerifera, doing nothing special really. It was transplanted a few years ago from the front. It's silvering up a bit, but it's a little bit disappointed really. I'm hoping it's sort of going to grow to be a better plant, but they're not the quickest growing. Next to it is and this is in a pot, new to me this year. This is my Manihot Graham, and that is in a pot, and it's going to go into my greenhouse for the winter. They are hardy, but it's still quite small, so I'm going to give it 1 year in the greenhouse. It's going to be planted probably into this border next year because it's just, I love the foliage. My brother-in-law has one in London, and his is sort of 8 foot tall and is pretty much a standout plant in his garden. So I'm really looking forward to planting that out next year. And I actually think I really like the foliage of it next to this dark-leaved Canna Red Velvet. Cannas for me this year been a real struggle. I had, as I said in a previous video, I was attacked so bad by slugs and snails, like most people were this year. I then went on a mad rampage, coming out every single night collecting them. I collected over 1,500 slugs and snails in a spell of just over a week, and that has really helped my garden. I've got the numbers down to, I'll struggle to find 10 at night now, so that's give these canners and lots of my other plants chance to recover. I've always had slug and snail damage, but nowhere near as bad as it was this year with this cold, wet start that we had. Right, let's get on with the plants. So just a bit of a potted display. So we've got this Cycas revoluta. I do have one in the ground. This is a new flush for this year. So the leaves behind will be cut off, which are yellowing a little bit when this comes in. So that's doing well. Most of these are sort of quite drought tolerant, succulent type plants, you know, with the agaves. So this is the Wales tongue agave, which I've just spiked myself there, brilliant. It's pretty hardy, that one, if you've got it in sort of free draining soil, and you might have to give it a sort of shelter over the top. But for me, it's in a pot. I've only purchased it this year. It's going to go into my greenhouse. I would like to plant it out sometime, but you really like that. I think they're really structural. Then we've got in there cordyline, Charlie Boy, and a few other agaves and aeoniums and bits like that. Something I am really going to start collecting this year, and I'm getting into, is aeoniums. And I've just got this one, which I think is absolutely lovely. And this is Aeonium Pink Witch. Obviously they're tender, so that will just go into my frost-free greenhouse and pretty much kept without watering for most of winter. But really love the colours that they bring. Going around, just a few more sort of agaves. I would like to find a free draining sort of area in the garden where I could sort of plant some of these out. We'll see. Then we've got the red Euphorbia Miners Merlot, Salvia Cherry Lips, Mahonia Soft Caress, and then we've got a Euphorbia Pasteuri, and there's other plants in there mixed in as well, which I might have to cut this Pasteuri down because they're stopping me from seeing some of the nicer plants. Like behind there, which just gets forgot about, is my Schefflera Delavi, which has been in the ground for quite a few years. It's took a little bit of winter damage here and there, but it probably needs a bit more of a better spot. It's going to stay there, but I think it needs a bit more light and to be showed off a bit. So I might have to trim this Euphorbia down a bit. See what happens there. We've got Yucca Rostrata in the pot. Going under this other Trachycarpus. I have lots of Trachycarpus in the garden. They're sort of the backbone of my garden. Just a few different potted bits to add a bit of colour. Not going to go into too much detail there. This is one of my cordyline Torbay Dazzlers, which pretty much goes through my garden being unnoticed by most people, but it's sort of got 3 stems and quite a nice specimen really. Probably just needs the plants trimming around it to sort of make it more of a focal point, to be honest, but pretty much left unprotected unless we get a really cold winter. This bit I never like, it's just way too dry. I always struggle under here. So we've got, this is a Gricilinia Broderick's Gold. Then we've got a few fascicularias under there because they cope really well with the conditions. They're very drought tolerant. They can take a certain amount of shade, they can take a certain amount of sun, so just a really forgiving plant. Camarops humilis with no room whatsoever. Plant is very small and it's going to grow out onto my lawn, but I'll leave it to it. Let's move around a bit. Cycas revoluta stays out all year round, gets a sort of builder's bag over the top of it and a bit of fleece in the ground if it gets really cold. Sort of less than, sort of maybe, or I don't know, let's say -5. It all depends. I say it all the time, hardiness is relevance for how long it is and how much protection, overhead protection, your microclimate, all that kind of stuff. But in general, I don't really protect it unless it gets really cold, and then something will go over it. Absolutely really sort of glorious structural looking plants, and definitely worth having in your garden. Just be aware though, it doesn't get mentioned too many times, they do have a certain amount of toxicity in the leaves. So if you had a young dog, a puppy or something that likes to chew plants, I wouldn't have this dog, because it could make them, wouldn't have this plant, sorry, because it could make them very sort of ill. But generally, you know, I've got a dog and it's never touched it, anything like that, but I thought I should point it out because sometimes it doesn't get mentioned. What we got in here, we've got just a basic fuchsia, formium, purpurea, there's another soft caress, there's my Trachycarpus princeps, which has been in the ground for years and is finally deciding to grow, another Torbay dazzler, then we've got Cordyline Pink Passion, and I actually think this is a much more tropical, colourful one than the Charlie Boy. It's not going to be very hardy. I've kept it in a pot, keep it in the greenhouse, and bring it out every year. It may be able to take up to -4, -5. I like it. I don't want to risk damaging it, so I've got the room to bring it in, hopefully, so I will. Okay, so this is new to me this year, planting like this, and this is the Black-Eyed Susan, and it, be fair, I thought it would only probably get to about 2 meters tall, and it's got right to the top and then wanted to carry on going, so it probably would have reached nearly 3 meters tall if I'd give it more room. It's done really well. One thing I'd sort of not realized when I'd done it is obviously as it grows tall, the flowering must come on the newer growth, because the flowering works its way up. So I've got all these flowers at the top and none down the bottom. So I don't know whether I could sort of change that by a little bit of pruning, doing something a bit different. It is tender, so I'm either probably going to leave it in and put a new one next year, or I may dig it up and then put it in the greenhouse and let it grow next year. But it had a lot more sort of ratio of flowers per leaf when it was smaller, and now it's sort of mainly leaves. I still like it for that tropical jungly leaf, but I have been dead-ending it as well, but I just wish it probably carried a bit more of the orange flowers, because the orange flowers look really good against the burgundy of this Canna Australia. So, but I think that's been a success. It's grown really well, it's in a sunny location, and yeah, really like that. So should I go down the path first, or should I walk back? Let me go back a little bit. Okay, so we've got here Formium Yellow Wave. Every year I debate whether to keep it in or out. I keep leaving it, we'll see next year. Then this is a large Camerops humilis. That's probably now, I would say, about 8 foot tall, and we've got the Waggy next to it. Then down here we have the Ostromeria, and I'll tell you what, 2 weeks ago this was stunning in full flower, and it was probably maybe nearly 3 times the size. We had a really windy spell, absolutely trashed it. I had to cut loads of the branches off because they were all hanging all over the lawn and the path, but still, what a glorious plant. Really tropical looking flowers on it, hardy, yeah, absolutely brilliant. And I love the way the orange of the flowers against the burgundy of the Canna Australia look. Really good combination there. We'll go back round to the left because it's just the easier path for me to do. So this is where I had quite a lot of slug damage, and in my video I showed this plant here to the side. This is Brassioopsis fatsoides, and I came out here one night and it was nearly completely destroyed. I found lots and lots of slugs growing up the stem, and actually you can see some of the damaged leaves still on it below. So that's what they were doing to it. And like I say, after my mast sort of hunt down, I've managed to get it to bring it right back. Took a little bit of damage the other day when it was really windy. They are quite delicate, these Brassiopsis, some of them, so you need to put them in quite a sheltered place. This is sort of semi-shaded and it's quite protected by all the other plants, because when it's windy they do get battered around quite a lot. Also, my black-leafed hydrangea got it right back to the ground, and that's slowly starting to recover. And you can see just there, this was planted last year. It's like a Colocasia esculenta, and it gets quite burgundy stems. It isn't at the minute because it's quite shady, and it's a really big leafed one. I don't know the name. I thought I dug it all out, but there's two that's recovered, so that's proven to be pretty hardy but slow to come back. I will dig that out and replant it. I have a few in pots, but quite a lot of Colocasias came back for people after the last winter this year, which is quite surprising for how wet it was, but they are a plant that will always surprise. Going back, we have, let's get me head straight, Acuba graciofolia. So I quite like that. Evergreen, jagged edges. That's going to grow up eventually and fill that spot with a nice sort of glossy green leaf. And then a few other plants that unanimous and that are quite boring, so I won't go into too much detail about them. Spoke about this a few times. Persicaria, Virginiana, Variegata, my favourite Persicaria. Looks absolutely stunning. It's took a little bit of damage on the whites, but that was when we was away on holiday. There was nowhere near watering for a few days, and it was really warm, and I think that's sort of when the worst of that happened. Otherwise, if you keep it well watered with a certain amount of shade, it's a really nice looking plant. Other Mahonias, I like to repeat plant. I think it brings balance to the garden. I have one this side that is a soft caress, and I have a larger one if I move back a bit on the other side. So I've sort of staggered them on the same path to just sort of, I think I may have mentioned it before, I almost wanted to feel like the path was cut through the sort of, I'm not going to say jungle, but you know what I mean. So that's why I've used Carex Everillo grasses on the right, and I've used them on the left, because I sort of wanted to tie the two in together. Okay, let's move around. This has been frustrating. It's grown really well, my Brassiopsis mitis, and even though it's really sort of quite sheltered around here, these Brassiopsis, the leaves are very delicate, and you can sort of see it's all leaning a bit to the left, and that's because we had that last windstorm and it all just kept getting battered towards the left, and it mangled up a few of the leaves and sort of pushed it out of shape a little bit. But one thing I will say about it is they're quite quick growers, you know, so and when they look good, they do look good. I put that one there first, and then I put the Fatsoides here, which is obviously a different variety, but they are a similar looking leaf, because I sort of wanted to try and tie the two in to the same pathway. And they're an expensive plant, and they are a real sort of eye-catching plant, but you got to watch them a little bit. Slugs and snails do like to eat them. The Fatsoides one much more than this, I found. The spiky stems don't do anything to stop that, but they can get quite battered quite easy. So just try to put it in somewhere sheltered is my recommendation. Then this year I have gone for quite a lot of Spanish moss down here, which is obviously tender, and I bring it into my greenhouse. I'm going to in winter and just hang it up in there. I've got quite a bit around this area, and it just really creates a lovely soft atmosphere. If it's dry, I just have a couple of spray bottles where I just spray them with rainwater. It all depends on how dry it is, probably every few days, or you can just dunk them in a bucket of water or something like that, just to sort of keep them hydrated. But obviously they're air plants, so they don't need too much. Here's my potted begonia luxurians, which is pretty much, I don't know if I'm going to say my favourite begonia, but what a plant that is. I just don't seem to be, even, I know it's potted, but even with feed and stuff like that, I just can't seem to get it to look as glorious as some of the people do. Simon and Harriet's garden, which is on my channel, his is absolutely stunning. Those of you that know Mike Clifford, he has got absolutely stunning ones. I think I just probably need to give it a little bit more attention, a little bit more feed and treatment, but it's growing well. Tender, so goes into my greenhouse again. Most of my garden doesn't go into my greenhouse, just so you know. Probably about 80% of it stay out, but I do tend to add some of these tender plants just to give it a bit more wow factor. So round here, this is the bottom end of my shady part of the garden. Mainly shady because it's under the very large tetrapanax. And I've spoke about this in a previous video. This is part that needs some work. I will talk about it in the future, but the patio is coming up. I'm pretty much sure it's going to have a bridge across here and across there with a waterfall there, a pond there. It'll go under the bridge and there'll be a pond here. The patio was done probably 13 years ago using some old slabs that I got off eBay. It's had its day and it's time for a big revamp. So around here we have, actually it's dried out a little bit. It needs a little bit of a care attention again when I was on holiday. But pretty much my favourite Brassioopsis, which is Brassioopsis bodinieri. It's more tender than the other one, so again that's going to come in along with the variegated monstera. That will go into my heated greenhouse as well, but they have one of them at Jersey Cottage Nursery and it is stunning. So it's a lot bigger than mine and I'm going to be pushing that next year. I'll repot that up and try and get that into a nicer size plant because it's just got such beautiful structural leaf shape. Love it. And talking of structural beautiful leaf shape, here's another tender plant, and this is my Travesia palmata, which is quite hard to get hold of now. And your sort of more juvenile leaves will look like that, and then as it gets older, it will get more snowflake type leaves. This one's in a bit of recovery. It got very dried out again. This is the trouble with plants in pots. If you have to go away on holiday, they if you've got no one to water them, they can suffer quite bad, unfortunately. Right, so what else we got? We've got some just basic potted plants around there which are slowly going to go into this area once the pond bit gets done. Now I'm pretty much 95% sure I'm going to do this pond, but as a disclaimer, life changes. If things happen and I don't get it done in spring, then I'll just deal with it and do something at a later date. But that is my plan. Once everything's died down, to redig that out in spring and get that started ready for next summer. Got the tree ferns at the back and basically just green plants around here. Okay, moving round. This tour's turning longer than I thought, and I'll tell you what else is happening. I have to be very careful because I keep getting face full of spiders. So many have built webs across here and I keep getting them all over me. I'm stopping now, clearing some under me. Right, let's move around to another one of my shady borders. This is nearly all greens as well. I do sometimes add a little pop of colour into it, but we've got this, which I mentioned a few times, one of my favourite ferns, Polystricum polyblepharum. Really good looking fern all year round. Then we got fatseas, and this isn't something I'm growing. This has worked its way over from the neighbour's garden over the top of my palm trees and is a bramble, which I've just noticed that's worked its way down from there. Brilliant. Moving that to one side, Fatsia polycarpa Edward Needham form. Glorious looking plant, hardy. Looks just like the green fingers because that's pretty much tissue cultured from this plant somewhere along the line. This one is in quite a lot of shade and just does really well. Really well. Looks good all year round. Love it. One of my favourite plants. Then we've just got some fatsias and other bits in here. We've got what is just flowering now. If we move ourselves up, getting ready. This is my Scheffleria, one of my Scheffleria rhododendrofolias. I'll move in here. You can see sort of some of the lower growth. One of the hardiest Schefflerias you can grow. Absolutely brilliant plant. Let's move around here. So we've basically got Camerops humilis, Salvia hot lips there with some Canna Intrigue, and this is a Tetrapanix pup from the big one at the back there. It only sends off a few. That was the first one it had sent off in about 10 years, to be fair, and it grew just in the spot where I liked it, so I've kept it, and it's going to give me that overhead canopy. One thing visiting one of the contemporary jungle garden that Anthony owns recently, I loved, and that video is on my channel, by the way. Check it out. It's one of the best gardens out there, you'll see. I loved the way he had this Tetrapanix canopy above his head, so that is something I'm doing with that one, cutting the lower growth off to create this sort of standardized Tetrapanix canopy above my head to give me more of that sort of jungle feel. So the sort of bottom end of the garden, I do tend to give more of a jungle look, and by jungle look I would say what we do with that is we use bigger leaves, greener leaves, tone down the colour, and that will give you more of a jungle look using the foliage and the green leaf shapes. Whereas the more tropical side to the gardening, you'd be adding more sort of colour and different leaf shapes and flowers to give you that more tropical look than a jungle look, I suppose, is a simpler way of putting it. Okay, so we're going to move back round. The right side of the border is all shady, and to be fair, I haven't done a lot with this. There's a few potted plants in there just to sort of fill some gaps. That is a project that I still need to do. I'm not going to go too much into detail because there's not a lot there to talk about. A few bamboos and trachycarpus and bits and bobs. Okay, these are another two of my tree ferns. Minimal protection, bit of fleece in the top unless it gets really cold, and then I might have to wrap them up. Underneath we have mainly ferns and a few begonias and bits like that. Around the water feature, I like to use ferns and that just to sort of soften it. And then here is my Amorphophallus konjac, and obviously this comes in to the greenhouse. I dig it up, it's just a bulb, store it for winter, dry, and then bring it back. Now this isn't actually two plants in one, it was one bulb and it created two growth points, which isn't a normal thing for it to do, but it has for me. And because it's a bit too shady out here, it's been leaning out to the light, so I'll find a better place for it next year because they are a glorious looking foliage plant. And then this was mentioned to me by a viewer a while ago when I showed a different begonia, and they said they had a begonia called Begonia Carolinifolia, sorry. I've just got another spider on my head which is totally distracting me. And this is a tender begonia as far as I know, and I love the leaf shape on this. I have 2 or 3 of these around the garden now. They almost look like a mini sort of palm tree when the bottom's cut off. Really smart little thing. Well, probably worth growing if you've got somewhere to keep it over winter frost free. Love that plant. Right, water feature. Let's go around. Shady. I've shown this loads of times. I'm going to go too much detail. It's a lot more shady than it used to be now because of the gazebo that's gone above it, the tiki hut. but these are nearly all fatsias and ferns. If you want to see that in more detail, there's plenty of videos on my channel showing that, so I'm not going to go too much into detail. Let's just show some of these potted plants. Colocaceas, they're all potted this year and they haven't done so well for it. Again, a bit too dry. They are in trays of water. So for instance, this yellow splash is in a tray of water, and we've got here, this is like the sweet potato vines. These are tender. I just buy these every year for that really bright sort of colour. There's some tender sort of begonias and bits in there as well. Coleus. This is my illustrious Colocacia. Again, it's now getting to a point where it probably needed to be potted up, but it's getting nearer the end of the season now, so I'm not too worried. The Coleus, you can usually just take cuttings and keep somewhere, like on a sunny windowsill. I'm not sure I'm going to bother, because these like literally were so cheap to buy and they've grown so well. I don't know if I can really be bothered. We'll see. So this is Begonia avia. I'll bring that into the greenhouse as well. And then probably one of my favourite begonias is Begonia bonita chiba, which is just this beautiful purpley colour, and it's such a good contrast against the other plants. It pretty much was the standout plant, but the others have sort of grown in the way of it a bit. And then if we go up, I'm going to do a video very soon, hopefully, about the different cannas, and I'll go into more detail. But this one is Thai Rainbow, and it's done really well, grow about 2 meters high. And I also have some musifolias and some other bits in the garden. Cannas were a bit slow for me this year, as I think they may have been for a lot of people, but have probably sped up a bit over time. Actually, I'm going to go back one more potted display I haven't really shown. This is another cordyline pink passion. I've mentioned it before. I've got a few in the same eye line to sort of try and tie them all in. And this is a black-leafed sweet potato vine, and I was a bit surprised by this because it's grown just as well as the lime green one around the corner, and this one's nearly in all shade. I thought it would need a lot more sun than that, but it's a lot shady around here because of the structure above it, but has still done just as good with its growth. Then we have like other Coleuses, and we've got some oxalis down the bottom, and we've got this Plectanthus, something like Argentinum or something like that, which is obviously a tender plant. We've also got Begonia Burl Marks, which is also tender. So these potted displays tend to have a lot more of my tender plants that can come in but give me a lot more colour for the summer months. So this area will be quite a lot cleared out. Most of the patio will be cleared. They'll all come into the greenhouse, but most of what you see in the borders will stay there all year round. So I thought I'd go around, show you what I'm growing. This video's over 30 minutes long now, which is longer than I thought it would be. Any questions, please leave it in the comments. I'm going to do a lot of changing in the garden next year. There's so much I'm not happy with. I know that quite a lot of people comment and say their garden's lovely and that, and I thank you very much for that. But it's how I feel about the garden, and as much as I really love it, there's loads of bits I want to change that haven't quite worked for me, and that actually isn't a negative. That's sort of a positive thing that I find of it, because it excites me to keep changing it and finding new plants, more unusual plants. And something definitely I'm looking at doing next year is trying to find the best of the best plants. So for instance, if you're going to put some grasses in, put the best grass that you can get, that you can afford, let's say, to your budget. And that's something where I want to evolve my garden. You know, I am limited for space now, so can I find the best plants for that space, and that's part of what I'm going to do. Thank you very much for watching. Please leave it in the comments, anything you got to say. Really appreciate people subscribing as well. Really does help out the channel, and is something that is totally free and just helps YouTube get my sort of videos out there and share my garden, share my experiences. I've got quite a lot of videos on my garden of tours that I've done of some absolutely stunning private gardens, so please have a look at them. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.